You know those people that tell you to like drink warm milk if you're having trouble sleeping? What the heck? Who drinks warm milk? Am I the only one that's completely disgusted by that? I've always thought the colder the milk, the better. Not to mention, if I could go back and change anything from my memory bank, I would probably erase the part where I found out where milk comes from. I don't need to know that, okay? It's disgusting. Have you ever seen anybody milk a cow? It looks completely unnatural. Who the heck came up with this stuff anyways? I'm getting completely off track here. I apologize. Let's get straight into today's video. And I will say, look, I've never cheated on my beautiful, loving wife. But is this what it feels like? Because I kind of feel like I'm betraying and being unfaithful to McFarlane at the moment, because I'm going to be talking about a line that isn't from McFarlane. I'll be brutally honest. I would say like a good 40% of my content is based around the DC license or the DC universe from McFarlane. However, today we're switching it up. We're talking about a completely different line. I think I've maybe mentioned them maybe like twice on the channel. I don't really get too deep into them, but recently they have definitely been piquing my interest. And in today's video, I thought we would take a look at some of the newest pre-orders that went up from Beast Kingdom. We're going to be talking about a new DC action figure line, or a new DC action figure wave coming from them. They already have a DC line. They've already actually done some pretty interesting DC action figure waves. If I'm not mistaken, they've done even like Batman versus Superman. They did the Justice League live action adaptation. They did the newest Reeves Batman universe. They even did the Michael Keaton Batman, which is very popular nowadays. So they definitely have quite a bit of experience with the DC license. And so it's nice to see something out of left field, something that isn't what we're used to seeing from McFarlane. Not to say that I'm going to betray McFarlane and just start buying Beast Kingdom action figures, but as I said, they've definitely piqued my interest over the past few months, and I decided to take a look at these pre-orders and share my personal thoughts on the newest pre-orders from Beast Kingdom. We're getting a new Darkseid, a new Flash, Green Lantern, Batman, as well as Superman. And I should reiterate, I'm not 100% sure where they're basing their source material on. I'm going to assume that they're just kind of taking some liberties when it comes down to these figures, because they don't appear to be necessarily like quote unquote classic appearance for each of these characters. I'm going to assume it's closer to what the like pre-Rebirth era looked like. But I like these figures. I really like how matte the color tone is for each individual character. It's not bright. At least based on the promotional images, there doesn't appear to be a ton of shine on these figures, and I genuinely enjoy that. Now, I will say we've gotten multiple different versions of each character, so I'm going to assume that they may be reusing some body molds here and there, but that's pretty on par with what most manufacturers do. They reuse body molds if it makes sense. Now, I will say, and clearly this is not going to fit in with your DC Multiverse display or your Multiverse display from McFarlane. However, some of these, as I've mentioned prior, if you pose them in the correct pose, you can maybe sneak them into some of your McFarlane displays. These are closer to like a little over 8 inches, whereas in the DC Multiverse from McFarlane is closer to like 7.5 inches. So they're only off by a little bit, especially that Darkseid figure. I think that one's probably the one that would be a prime candidate for fitting into your DC Multiverse display. Having said all that, in terms of price points, Darkseid does appear to be $87.99 on Entertainment Earth, and then the rest of the figures are $54.99. That is through Entertainment Earth. Every single retailer will have these at different price points. I'm not exactly sure why. I'm not sure if it's because of the shipping from overseas or because they're directly, like getting pre-orders from the manufacturer. I'm not sure, because I actually checked their official websites and they're going for about $20 more. So, and that's without shipping. So I'm not sure exactly where the discrepancy is. Now, taking a look at the Flash action figure, there's not a lot going on in terms of the body. The sculpt work seems somewhat plain, but I don't mean that in a bad way. Sometimes over texturing a particular body mold, especially if it's a suited character, tends to work against it. So this one is kind of a sleeker body mold, and unlike the Flash that we got, or the the Rebirth Flash that we got from McFarlane, which came with like little lightning effect pieces that could be ported onto the arms and things of that nature, there are no extra accessories aside from the extra hands. You're getting 8 hands total here, which gives you a plethora of different displaying options when it comes down to your Flash action figure. I will say I like this figure. It's not like your prototypical version of like a Rebirth or a more classic Flash. As I said, those outfits or those suits are actually a little bit more textured. There's a lot more detail going on. This one feels like a more classic iteration of Flash. There's nothing overdone. There's nothing overly complicated about the figure. It's just a simplistic, sleek looking Flash. Personally, I really like this figure. And then you have the Green Lantern action figure, which I'm not sure why it scales down in terms of articulation. The Flash action figure, at least according to the description, has 22 points of articulation. The Green Lantern drops all the way down to 18, so I'm not sure where those articulation points are taken away from the Green Lantern or where those extra articulation points are placed on the Flash. I think I'd have to like dissect the figures a little bit more or actually hold them in hand. From what I can see, the Green Lanterns, the articulation is going to scale back a little bit. You will get the same amount of hands. You will get 8 hands total, and then you will be able to have the Green Lantern itself. Everything that I said about the Flash suit applies to the Green Lantern, and I think it will apply for the entire wave here. It's simplistic, but it's also really well designed. I like the paint here. It definitely pops. This one is not as matte as the others in this particular wave. It definitely feels like it's a little bit brighter. It's a little bit shinier than the rest, but I actually like it for this particular character. I will say I really like that head sculpt as well. There's like a little bit, there's quite a bit of detail, across the face, the little wrinkles towards the forehead area. I really like this figure. I think this one might be slightly higher than the Flash in terms of my wish list, but both of them are great offerings thus far. Then we have the Superman action figure. I believe it comes with a clothed wired cape from what I can see in the promotional images, although the description itself does not mention anything about a wired cape. It just says that it has some sort of cloth cape. What's interesting is you're going to get quite a few different accessories with this Superman. You will get a grand total of 10 hands, which I think is more than any other release for this particular wave. And I will say, same thing, I like the colors, I really like the design on the suit. The only thing that I'm not a huge fan of is maybe the head sculpt, and not so much because it's not a great head sculpt. Like I said previously with the Green Lantern, there's a ton of detail. There's definitely a lot to look at, but this particular version of Superman just looks, I don't know, kind of too menacing. He looks like too grown. I'm not sure what it is. I mean, like my prototypical vision of Superman is like a younger man with a more calm demeanor, but at the same time very optimistic. I don't know if you can kind of transport that onto just one particular head sculpt. Not to mention this one looks a little bit more aged. I'm not sure what it is. He looks to be closer to like his mid-30s, whereas in like my prototypical vision of Superman is in his late 20s. I know that's not like a huge difference. It's not a huge gap, but you can definitely see it when it comes down to this particular release. And to clarify, I was wrong about the Superman. I actually just took a closer look at the Batman action figure, and that one actually comes with a grand total of 12 hands. So you're getting even more options here when it comes down to displaying your figure. What's absolutely insane, and not really a knock on the line as a whole, but I feel like they're lacking accessories. Batman is just a perfect example of that. You're getting like 12 hands total, but you're not getting anything to hold here. Now, I will say, if you own McFarlane accessories, you have, quite a bit to choose from, whether that's batarangs or grapple hooks or so on and so forth. And they actually fit much better with this scale because usually they're oversized for the McFarlane line to begin with. They feel like they would fit much closer to the 1/9 scale, the 8-inch line, which is usually what the Beast Kingdom line offers. However, they're assuming that you have a ton of accessories. It's definitely not a cheap line either, so it's just another kind of head scratching choice here. But I like the cape. I like the way that it looks draped over Batman. It just looks absolutely beautiful, and I think this is a completely different style of fabric. I'm not going to go on a limb and say that, but it definitely appears different than what we usually get from McFarlane and other imported action figures. And I should clarify, I think the closer that I look at the images, I think it's a pretty consistent theme that these just look a little bit more aged. They look a little bit more mature, and I think that's what Beast Kingdom was going for, even though, again, it's not like my prototypical vision of these characters. I guess it kind of makes sense because they made it consistent throughout the entire line. Batman also looks like he's in his late 30s, like he's gone through stuff, you know, like he's paid his mortgage for like, you know, 15 years. The dude has gone through a couple of divorces. He probably has changed diapers now for a couple of years. He's gotten some shit stains on his suits. He has to get them dry cleaned. I don't know, like he's lived through stuff is what I'm basically saying. Again, the figure looks great, and I like the fact that it's a different look for some of these characters. It's definitely not what we're used to with modern comic books. They're usually represented much younger, and these look like just older, more experienced versions of our beloved DC characters. And then finally, moving on to Darkseid himself. If you for any reason feel like McFarlane is not going to give us a more classic representation or a more prototypical version of Darkseid, this might be your only option, because I think I've heard rumblings about him maybe getting around to it. But as of the moment of this recording, we only have the video game version as well as the superpowers version, and none of those color schemes really fit into like really any display. It feels like they're very source material specific, and I think a lot of people have been turned off by that. But this figure, 18 points of articulation, 4 hands total, and then you are getting the Omega Beam effect pieces included. I think there's great value when it comes down to this figure. It also appears to come with some sort of wired cape. I'm not sure if that's removable. I tried going through the description, but it didn't really clarify that. I'm just going to assume it's a removable piece that can be, you know, displayed with or without. I genuinely like this Darkseid. There's a ton going on with his face sculpt, his arms. They did a really good job when it comes down to the sculpt work for this figure. So as I said, they're up for pre-order right now on Entertainment Earth. If you're looking for the base figures, you're paying $54.99. And then the Darkseid action figure is going to be going for $87.99. Just keep in mind that there are some things that are different from the DC multiverse. I know every time I talk about the Beast Kingdom line, people, you know, tend to attack them, but you have to keep in mind it's way more plastic. These figures are, you know, slightly bigger than the DC multiverse, and yes, they will usually be more expensive. That's just how it works. I know a lot of people just assume that it's only like, you know, an inch worth of extra plastic on an action figure, but it does make quite a bit of a difference. Not to mention, these figures usually have like a little bit more sculpted detail than a lot of the McFarlane action figures, and from time to time, their accessories or their hands or, you know, their cloth capes are just slightly better than those particular figures, at least on promotional images. I don't have these figures in hand. I don't know them, so I couldn't necessarily tell you, but I will say there are some great things about this line. I like the fact that they're skewing a little bit from what we're used to. They're older, more seasoned versions of the characters. I like the design. I like the head sculpts. It's definitely something that we're not used to. But I will say there are some downsides to this particular line. Primarily, I noticed that a lot of the figures, or at least some of the figures, don't have butterfly joints. I'm not sure exactly what's going on. The ab crunch maybe leaves a little bit to be desired, as well as the accessories, especially for Batman, is something that I noticed. They could have easily just done like 4 or 2 pairs of hands or 4 hands total, and then included like a batarang or some other little cool accessories. I felt like that could have been, or I should say, it was a huge missed opportunity. Same thing with Superman. I would have loved like his some heat vision accessory pieces that could have been ported onto the head sculpt. Not to mention, there are no extra head sculpts. There's no face plates, or extra face plates, I should say. So there are definitely some questions to be answered here. There are definitely some minor little issues that I might run into with the figures, but only time will tell. I actually have to have these in hand. I have to articulate them and play around with them and actually be able to give you guys my personal perspective. There are great things about this line. As I said, the design, so on and so forth. The fact that you're getting an accurate Darkseid action figure for somewhat affordable price point. I mean, you have to keep in mind, if the rest of the wave is about like 8 inches, I can only assume that Darkseid is close to about 10 inches. It's, you know, a big hefty figure with some great accessories, great sculpt work. So I think $90 is maybe pushing it a little bit, but if you're willing to spend the extra, you can get a more classic / modern design for Darkseid that will fit into multiple different displays. So it's just a matter of personal perspective. I will say, keep an eye on this line. It's one of those that I myself have been very curious about, and I've been, you know, researching and looking into a little bit more consistently. So As always, this is just my personal opinion, my personal thoughts. Let me know what experiences you guys have had with Beast Kingdom. Do you like them? Do you purchase them on a consistent basis? Let me know down below. Are you excited for this particular wave? These figures look really well. I mean, like I said, only time will tell if they're going to live up to the hype. So as always, let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to enjoy the hobby. That's the most important part of all this. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.